The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered behind the ornate iron gates. Among them stood three college friends from America, Jake, Marcus, and Tyler, who had saved up for months to visit London. They clutched their cameras and phones, eager to capture the perfect shot of the famous Queen's Guard. The red-uniformed guard stood perfectly still at his post, his tall black bearskin hat adding to his imposing presence. His face remained expressionless beneath the chin strap, eyes fixed straight ahead as hundreds of visitors snapped photos and chattered excitedly around him. "Dude, look at him," Jake whispered to his friends, pointing at the motionless soldier. "He's like a statue. I bet we could do jumping jacks right in front of him and he wouldn't even blink." Marcus, always the instigator of their group, grinned mischievously. "You know what would be hilarious? What if we could get him to break character somehow? My cousin told me these guys aren't supposed to react to anything." Tyler, the more cautious one, shifted nervously. "I don't know, man. Isn't that kind of disrespectful? He's doing his job." But Jake was already warming to Marcus's idea. "Come on, Tyler, it's just harmless fun. We're not going to hurt anyone. Besides, we'll be gentle about it. Think of the video we could make. It would go viral." For sure. The three friends had been documenting their European adventure on social media, competing with their classmates back home to see who could create the most outrageous content. Their followers expected constant entertainment, and the pressure to top their previous posts was mounting. As they watched the guard, they noticed something interesting. During the changing of the guard ceremony, which happened every few hours, there were brief moments when the area around the sentry box became less crowded. Tour groups would move on to other attractions, and the constant stream of photographers would thin out slightly. "Look," Marcus pointed out, "right after the big ceremony ends, most people follow the other guards. There's like a 5-minute window where it's pretty quiet around here." Jake nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "And security is focused on managing the crowd during the ceremony. They're not really watching individual tourists as closely afterward." Tyler looked around nervously at the police officers and security cameras positioned throughout the area. "Guys, I really think this is a bad idea. What if we get arrested? What if we get banned from the country?" But his friends were already lost in their planning, whispering excitedly about their scheme. Marcus pulled out his phone and started researching Queen's Guard protocols online. "It says here that they're trained to remain absolutely motionless, unless there's a real threat. They're basically human statues during their duty." "Perfect," Jake said, rubbing his hands together. "So he won't resist if we just, pose him a little bit. Maybe tie a ribbon around him or something cute like that. Nothing harmful, just funny." The idea was taking shape in their minds, fueled by the adrenaline of doing something forbidden and the promise of social media fame. They had seen other tourists get away with minor pranks, people placing objects near the guards or making funny faces inches from their stoic expressions. As the morning progressed, they scouted the area more carefully, timing the guard rotations and noting the patterns of security patrols. They observed how other visitors behaved, what seemed to be acceptable, and where the boundaries appeared to be. The guard they had chosen stood near one of the more photogenic spots, where the ornate architecture provided a perfect backdrop. His position was slightly isolated from the main tourist flow, making him an ideal target for their prank. Marcus had found some colorful ribbon in a nearby gift shop, claiming it was for his girlfriend back home. Tyler continued to express doubts, but peer pressure and the excitement of the moment were wearing down his resistance. "Look, we'll be super quick about it," Jake assured him. "In and out, get the photo, untie him immediately. He probably deals with silly tourists all day anyway. We're not the first people to think of this." As the afternoon ceremony approached, their hearts began racing with anticipation. They positioned themselves strategically, cameras ready, waiting for the perfect moment when the crowds would thin and they could execute their plan. The guard remained absolutely still, unaware that three young tourists were about to turn his routine duty into an international incident that would make headlines around the world and teach them a lesson they would never forget about respecting those who serve their country with honor and dignity. The moment arrived sooner than expected. The changing of the guard ceremony had just concluded, and as predicted, the massive crowd began to disperse. Tour groups shuffled toward other attractions, parents herded children toward the gift shops, and the constant clicking of camera shutters gradually subsided. Jake gave Marcus and Tyler a meaningful look. "This is it," he whispered. "Remember, we have maybe 3 or 4 minutes before the next wave of tourists arrives." Tyler's palms were sweating as he gripped his phone. "I still think we should just take a normal selfie and call it a day," but Marcus was already moving, his colorful ribbons hidden in his jacket pocket. "Tyler, just film it. If anything goes wrong, we'll say it was Jake's idea." The guard, whose name was Lance Corporal William Hayes, though the tourists didn't know, Charles had been on duty for nearly 2 hours. He had maintained his position with military precision, just as he had been trained to do. Behind his stoic expression, his mind wandered briefly to his younger sister's upcoming wedding, for which he had requested leave. William had dealt with countless tourists during his service. Some were respectful and maintained appropriate distance. Others pushed boundaries, making faces, trying to get reactions, occasionally dropping things near his feet to see if he would respond. He had been trained for all of this, taught to remain absolutely motionless unless facing a genuine security threat. Jake approached first, pretending to take a casual selfie while actually serving as a lookout. "Coast is clear," he muttered under his breath. Marcus moved swiftly but quietly toward the guard. His heart pounded as he got within arm's reach of the soldier. For a moment he hesitated, seeing the man up close, noting the young face beneath the ceremonial hat, the steady breathing, the slight tension in his jaw that suggested he was very much aware of what was happening around him. "He's just a guy, like us," Marcus thought briefly. But the pressure from his friends and the thrill of the moment pushed him forward. Working quickly, Marcus began winding the colorful ribbon around the guard's arms and torso, being careful not to interfere with his weapon or any essential equipment. The ribbon was bright pink and yellow, chosen specifically because it would show up well in photos and videos. William felt the ribbon being wrapped around him but maintained his discipline. This wasn't the first time tourists had tried to interact with him inappropriately, though it was certainly the most elaborate attempt. His training kicked in. Assess the threat level, determine if intervention was necessary, maintain position unless circumstances demanded otherwise. The tourists didn't seem aggressive or dangerous, just foolish. William decided to endure the prank while mentally noting details he would report to his superiors later. He remained perfectly still, even as the ribbon tightened slightly around his arms. Tyler filmed nervously from several feet away, constantly glancing around for security, guards or police officers. "Hurry up," he hissed. "There's a family with kids heading this way." Marcus worked faster, creating an elaborate bow around the guard's midsection. The absurdity of the situation struck him. Here was a trained soldier, representing centuries of British military tradition, being decorated like a birthday present by 3 college kids from Ohio. Jake snapped photo after photo, already imagining the likes and shares they would get on social media. "This is perfect," he whispered excitedly. Nobody's going to believe this, but their celebration was premature. What they didn't realize was that William wasn't alone. The Queen's Guard operates as part of a larger security network, with multiple layers of protection and communication systems that tourists never see. Sergeant Major David Richardson had been monitoring the situation from a nearby position. As an experienced NCO, he had developed an instinct for spotting trouble before it escalated. When he saw the 3 young men acting suspiciously around Lance Corporal Hayes, he began moving closer while alerting other members of the guard through their discreet communication system. The tourist had no idea that their harmless prank had triggered a carefully orchestrated security response. Multiple guards were already moving into position, approaching from different angles to surround the area without causing panic among other visitors. Marcus tied the final knot in his elaborate ribbon decoration, stepping back to admire his handiwork. "Perfect," he grinned. "Get one more shot, Jake." But as Jake raised his camera for another photo, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. From the corner of his eye, he could see several red-uniformed figures moving purposefully toward Their location. Guys, Jake's voice cracked slightly. I think we might have a problem. Tyler, still filming, followed Jake's gaze and felt his stomach drop. What had started as a silly prank was about to become something much more serious. The relaxed atmosphere of tourist fun was rapidly shifting into something that felt dangerous and uncertain. Marcus, still admiring his ribbon work, was the last to notice the approaching guards. When he finally turned around, his confident grin faded instantly. They were no longer three friends having harmless fun. They were three young men who had just made a very serious mistake in one of the most secure locations in London. The transformation of the scene was swift and dramatic. What had been a quiet courtyard with scattered tourists suddenly became a coordinated military operation. Sergeant Major Richardson's voice cut through the air with unmistakable authority. Step away from the guard immediately and place your hands where we can see them. Jake's camera slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering on the cobblestones. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden tension. Tyler's phone was still recording, capturing their shocked faces as the reality of their situation hit them. 4 additional guards had materialized from seemingly nowhere, moving with practiced precision to form a protective barrier around Lance Corporal Hayes and the 3 tourists. Their movements were fluid and purposeful. Clearly, this was not their first time dealing with a security incident. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Tyler muttered under his breath, his face draining of color. The fun adventure he had reluctantly joined was turning into his worst nightmare. Marcus stood frozen, his hand still raised near the ribbon he had just finished tying. His mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. "Wait, this is just a prank," he called out desperately. "We're not trying to hurt anyone." But Sergeant Major Richardson wasn't interested in explanations at that moment. His primary concern was neutralizing what could be a potential threat and protecting both the guard and the growing crowd of onlookers who had noticed the commotion. "Down on your knees, hands behind your heads," he commanded in a tone that left no room for argument. Jake felt his legs go weak. This couldn't be happening. They were supposed to be having fun, creating funny content for their friends back home. Instead, they were being treated like dangerous criminals in front of dozens of witnesses who were now filming everything with their own phones. The tourists who had been wandering nearby stopped and stared. Some pulled out their cameras, sensing that something dramatic was unfolding. Others quickly ushered their children away from the scene, not wanting to be caught up in whatever was happening. Lance Corporal Hayes remained perfectly still throughout the commotion, even as Sergeant Major Richardson carefully began removing the ribbons from his uniform. William's training held firm. He would maintain his post and dignity regardless of the chaos around him. "Please, we're really sorry," Jake pleaded as he slowly lowered himself to his knees as instructed. "We're just tourists. We didn't mean any harm. It was supposed to be funny." Tyler was now openly crying, the weight of potential consequences crashing down on him. His parents had warned him about getting into trouble abroad, about how foreign legal systems might not be as forgiving as those back home. "Are we going to jail?" he asked in a small, frightened voice. The guards maintained their professional demeanor, but Marcus could see the controlled anger in their eyes. These weren't just ceremonial figures in fancy uniforms. They were real soldiers who took their duty seriously, and the tourists had crossed a line that went far beyond harmless fun. Sergeant Major Richardson spoke into his radio, his words clipped and efficient. "Control, this is Richardson. We have a code yellow at Post 7. 3 individuals appears to be interference with sentry duty, requesting additional support and supervisor response." The response crackled back immediately. "Roger. Richardson, support units are en route, ETA 2 minutes. Marcus felt his heart sink even further. More guards were coming. This was escalating beyond anything they had imagined. What had started as a simple prank was turning into an international incident. Other tourists in the area were now openly staring and recording. The 3 friends could see their shocked faces appearing in the background of countless photos and videos that would probably end up on social media within minutes. Their families back home might see this before they even had a chance to call and explain what had happened. "Sir?" Jake tried again, his voice cracking with emotion. "We're really, really sorry. We're American students. We didn't know this would be such a big deal. Can't we just apologize and untie him?" but the sergeant major's expression remained stern. "You interfered with a Queen's Guard in the performance of his duty?" he said firmly. "This is not a tourist attraction. This is a working military installation, and what you've done constitutes a serious breach of security protocols." The weight of those words hit them like a physical blow. Security protocols, military installation. These weren't just angry tour guides. They were dealing with the British military and potentially international law enforcement. Tyler wiped his nose on his sleeve, trying to stop crying. "My parents are going to kill me," he whispered to himself. Marcus, always the leader of their group, felt the crushing responsibility of having initiated this disaster. His friends had followed his lead, and now they were all in serious trouble because of his stupid idea. The sound of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of additional personnel. The three friends remained on their knees, hands behind their heads as more uniformed figures surrounded them. The casual fun atmosphere of their London vacation had evaporated completely, replaced by the cold reality of military discipline and legal consequences. Lance Corporal Hayes, now free of his colorful ribbon decorations, continued to stand at attention, but those who knew him well would have noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the barely contained frustration at having his dignity compromised by thoughtless tourists who had no understanding of what his uniform represented. The courtyard had become a crime scene, and the three American college students were learning a harsh lesson about respect, consequences, and the difference between harmless fun and serious offense. The situation escalated rapidly when additional security personnel arrived on the scene. Palace security officers, distinguishable from the ceremonial guards by their modern tactical gear, moved efficiently to secure the area and begin their investigation. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins of the Metropolitan Police Special Protection Unit was among the responders. She had dealt with countless incidents involving tourists and the Royal Guard, but something about this case immediately caught her attention. As she surveyed the scene, she noticed the elaborate nature of the ribbon display and the obvious premeditation involved. Right then, Detective Inspector Collins announced as she approached the three kneeling students. "I'm Detective Inspector Collins with the Met Police. You're being detained while we sort out exactly what's happened here." Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "Are we under arrest?" "Not yet," Collins replied, her tone professional but not unkind. "But you need to understand the seriousness of what you've done. You've interfered with a serving member of Her Majesty's Guard in the performance of his duties. That's not a prank. That's a criminal offense." The detective inspector began questioning each tourist separately while her colleagues documented the scene and took statements from witnesses. Other tourists who had observed the incident were asked to share any photos or videos they had captured. Marcus was interviewed first. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by a growing awareness of how badly they had miscalculated. "We really didn't think it was illegal," he explained desperately. "We've seen other people take pictures with the guards and get close to them. We thought this was just, tourist stuff." Detective Inspector Collins studied the young man's face, recognizing the genuine remorse mixed with fear. "Tell me about your planning," she said calmly. "This wasn't spontaneous, was it? You brought materials, you waited for the right moment, you coordinated your actions." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Every detail of their preparation now sounded incriminating when described by a police officer. "We just wanted to get a good video for social media," he admitted. "Our friends back home, they expect us to post cool stuff from our trip. We weren't trying to hurt anyone or cause a security problem." Meanwhile, Jake was being questioned by another officer. His story corroborated Marcus's account, but the officer noted additional details about their behavior that painted a picture of calculated disrespect rather than innocent fun. Tyler, still visibly shaken, provided the most honest account of all. "I didn't want to do it," he confessed through tears. "I told them it was a bad idea, but I went along with it anyway because I didn't want to be the one who ruined the fun. I should have been stronger. I should have walked away." His honesty resonated with the interviewing officer, but it didn't change the facts of what had occurred or their collective responsibility for the incident. While the interviews continued, Sergeant Major Richardson was conducting his own assessment of the situation with Lance Corporal Hayes, who had finally been relieved from his post and could speak freely. "How are you feeling, Hayes?" the sergeant major asked with genuine concern. William Hayes straightened his uniform and composed his thoughts before responding. "I'm fine, sir. Frustrated, but fine. They didn't seem dangerous, just incredibly foolish. But sir, it felt like they saw me as some kind of tourist attraction rather than a soldier doing his duty." Richardson nodded grimly. "That's exactly what happened, and that's what makes this more than just a harmless prank. They didn't just tie ribbons around you. They disrespected everything you represent and undermined your ability to perform your duties." The sergeant major's analysis would prove crucial in determining how the authorities chose to proceed with the case. As the afternoon wore on, more details emerged about the three tourists. They were indeed college students from Ohio, traveling on legitimate tourist visas. They had no criminal records and no history of troublemaking. Their social media accounts showed typical vacation photos and videos, nothing that suggested malicious intent or extremist sympathies. However, their internet search history from the morning of the incident told a different story. They had specifically researched Queen's Guard protocols, looked up videos of previous tourist pranks, and even searched for information about legal consequences for interfering with British military personnel. Detective Inspector Collins reviewed this information with growing interest. "They knew this was wrong," she concluded. "They researched the rules specifically so they could break them more effectively. This wasn't ignorance, this was deliberate." The three friends remained in custody while officials debated their fate. They had missed their afternoon tour of Westminster Abbey and their dinner reservation at a restaurant they had been excited to try. Instead, they sat in uncomfortable chairs in a security office, contemplating how drastically their London adventure had changed course. Their phones had been temporarily confiscated to prevent them from posting about the incident or coordinating their stories. Without the constant distraction of social media, they were forced to confront the reality of their situation without filters or digital buffers. "I keep thinking about my parents," Tyler said quietly to his friends during a brief moment when they were allowed to speak. "They saved up to help pay for this trip. They were so excited for us to experience British culture and history. And now..." Jake nodded miserably. "My mom is going to see this on the news before I can even call her. She's going to think I've turned into some kind of delinquent." Marcus stared at his hands, the weight of leadership and responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "This is all my fault," he said finally. "I pushed for this. I should have listened when Tyler said it was a bad idea." The three friends faced an uncertain future as British authorities determined their fate, unaware that their story was about to take another unexpected turn that would test not only their own character, but also the character of the institutions they had so thoughtlessly challenged. After 3 hours of interviews, documentation, and deliberation, Detective Inspector Collins made a decision that surprised everyone involved. She had consulted with her superiors, reviewed British diplomatic protocols regarding American tourists, and most importantly, had a lengthy conversation with Lance Corporal Hayes about his perspective on the incident. "We're going to release you without charges," she announced to the three stunned students. "But there are conditions, and there are lessons that need to be learned here." Jake's relief was so overwhelming, he nearly collapsed. Tyler started crying, again, but this time from gratitude rather than fear. Marcus, however, seemed almost confused by the unexpected mercy. "I don't understand," Marcus said slowly. "We did everything you said we did. We planned it, we researched it, we knew it was wrong. Why are you letting us go?" Detective Inspector Collins studied the young man's face, appreciating his honesty. "Because Lance Corporal Hayes requested that we handle this as an educational opportunity rather than a criminal matter. He believes you're genuinely remorseful and that you'll learn more from understanding your mistake than from spending time in custody." She paused, letting the weight of the guard's generosity sink in. "But make no mistake, this is not because what you did was acceptable. This is because a professional soldier chose to show you more respect than you showed him." The three friends were escorted to a conference room where Lance Corporal Hayes waited. now out of his ceremonial uniform and wearing standard military dress. Seeing him as a regular person rather than a symbolic figure was jarring for the tourists. "Sir," Jake began immediately, "we are so incredibly sorry. We had no idea." William held up a hand to stop him. "Let me speak first," he said calmly. "I want you to understand something about what you did today, and it's not what you might expect." He gestured for them to sit down while he remained standing, his military bearing evident even in casual conversation. "I'm 22 years old," William began. "I have a sister getting married next month, parents who are proud of my service, and friends who respect what I do for a living. When I put on that uniform and stand guard, I'm not just a tourist attraction. I'm representing centuries of British military tradition and protecting something that matters to millions of people." Tyler nodded earnestly, hanging on every word. "But here's what really bothered me about today," William continued. "It wasn't the ribbons or the photos or even the disruption to my duty. It was that you saw me as something less than human. You saw a costume, a prop for your entertainment rather, than a person with dignity and purpose." Marcus felt his face burning with shame. "We never thought of it that way." "I know you didn't," William replied. "And that's the problem. You reduced me to a stereotype, a living statue that exists for your amusement. You never considered that. I might have feelings about being humiliated in front of my colleagues and the public." Jake spoke up hesitantly. "How can we make this right? There has to be something we can do." William smiled slightly, the first genuine expression they had seen from him. "Actually, there is. Detective Inspector Collins and I have discussed a proposal, if you're willing." He explained their idea. Instead of facing criminal charges, the three tourists would spend the next 2 days volunteering with a charity that supported British military veterans. They would hear stories from soldiers who had served in combat, learn about the real sacrifices made by military families, and gain a deeper understanding of what service actually means. Additionally, Detective Inspector Collins added, "You'll write public apologies that will be posted on the official palace social media accounts. Your faces won't be shown, but your words will help educate other tourists about appropriate behavior and respect." The three friends agreed immediately, grateful for the chance to make amends rather than face deportation or criminal prosecution. Over the following days, their experience at the Veterans Charity proved transformative. They met former soldiers who had lost limbs in Afghanistan, families who had lost loved ones in service to their country, and elderly veterans whose stories of sacrifice during World War II put their own problems into stark perspective. Margaret Thompson, a 78-year-old widow whose husband had died in the Falklands conflict, particularly impacted Tyler. "My Robert stood guard duty just like that young man you bothered," she told him gently. "He took pride in representing something bigger than himself. When you made fun of that tradition, you made fun of every soldier who ever stood where he stood." Her words weren't accusatory but rather educational, helping Tyler understand the deeper meaning behind the ceremony and tradition he had thoughtlessly mocked. Marcus found himself drawn to stories of modern soldiers who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He learned about the brotherhood among military personnel, the way they protected and supported each other, and the sacred trust between those in uniform and the people they serve. Jake discovered his own family's military history during their volunteer work. His great-grandfather had served in World War II, something he had never paid much attention to before. Now he understood why his grandmother kept those old military photos on her mantle, and why she always stood during the national anthem at baseball games. On their final day in London, the three friends returned to Buckingham Palace, not as pranksters, but as visitors who finally understood what they were witnessing. They watched the changing of the guard ceremony with new eyes, seeing not tourist entertainment but a living display of honor, duty, and sacrifice. Lance Corporal Hayes was on duty again, and though they didn't approach him or interrupt his service, they stood respectfully at the back of the crowd, watching a professional soldier perform his duties with the dignity they had once tried to undermine. Their public apologies, posted on official palace social media accounts, went viral, but for reasons they had never expected. Instead of becoming famous for a silly prank, They became known for taking responsibility, learning from their mistakes and showing that even foolish actions could lead to genuine growth and understanding. 6 months after returning to Ohio, the three friends had become different people. Their experience in London had fundamentally changed not only how they viewed military service, but how they approached their responsibilities as young adults in the world. Tyler had changed his major from business to social work, inspired by the veterans' charity workers who had shown him how to channel remorse into positive action. He volunteered at a local VA hospital every weekend, reading to elderly veterans and helping them write letters to their families. The experience had taught him that courage sometimes meant standing up to your friends when they wanted to do something wrong. "I think about that guard every day," Tyler confided to his girlfriend. "Not because I feel guilty anymore, but because he showed me what real dignity looks like. Even when we humiliated him, he handled it with more class than I've ever shown in my entire life." Marcus had taken a different path, but with equal commitment. He started a social media campaign called Respect and Travel that educated college students about cultural sensitivity and appropriate behavior when visiting foreign countries. His videos, which now reached hundreds of thousands of viewers, featured interviews with people from the service industry, cultural sites, and tourist destinations who shared their experiences with disrespectful visitors. "We were those ugly Americans everyone talks about," Marcus explained in one of his most popular videos. "We went to someone else's country and acted like it was our personal playground. But here's what I learned. When you disrespect someone else's culture or traditions, you're really showing how little you respect yourself." Jake had perhaps changed the most dramatically of all. He had enlisted in the National Guard after returning home, a decision that shocked his family and friends. The process wasn't easy. Military discipline was foreign to someone who had spent most of his life avoiding responsibility and seeking easy entertainment. "Why did you join?" his drill sergeant asked him during basic training. "Because I met a soldier in London who showed me what honor looks like," Jake replied honestly. "And I realized I wanted to be worthy of wearing a uniform like his." The three friends stayed in touch, their shared experience in London creating a bond that went deeper than their college friendship. They had seen each other at their worst moment and supported each other through the difficult process of genuine personal growth. Their story had indeed gone viral, but not in the way they had originally hoped. The palace's social media team had crafted their public apology into a powerful educational tool, showing it alongside videos of the changing of the guard ceremony to help tourists understand the significance of what they were witnessing. Lance, Corporal William Hayes, meanwhile, had been promoted to corporal and was now serving as a training instructor for new guards. He often used the story of the American tourists as a teaching example, not to mock them, but to illustrate the importance of maintaining dignity under pressure and the power of choosing education over punishment. "Those three lads taught me something too," he told his trainees. "They reminded me that behind every disrespectful act is often just ignorance that can be corrected with patience and the right approach. Sometimes the best way to defend our traditions is to help others understand why they matter." 1 year after the incident, Jake sent William a letter from his National Guard training. It was brief but heartfelt. "Thank you for seeing something in us worth saving. I hope to serve with the same honor you showed that day." William kept the letter in his duty locker, a reminder that even the most challenging moments could lead to positive outcomes. The three friends learned that their story had been included in orientation materials for American study abroad programs, helping other students understand the importance of cultural respect and the potential consequences of thoughtless behavior. They were proud that their mistake could prevent others from making similar errors in judgment. Tyler, now working with homeless veterans, often reflected on how different his life might have been if Detective Inspector Collins and Lance Corporal Hayes had chosen punishment over education. "They gave us a gift," he told Marcus during one of their regular phone calls. "They showed us that one mistake doesn't have to define you, but how you respond to that mistake absolutely does." Marcus nodded in agreement, even though they were speaking by phone. "You know what's funny? We wanted to go viral with a stupid prank video. Instead, we became famous for learning how to be better people. Turns out that's a much better story. Their experience had taught them that respect isn't just about following rules or avoiding trouble. It's about recognizing the humanity and dignity in everyone you meet, whether they're wearing a ceremonial uniform, working in a service job, or simply living their life in a way that's different from yours. The Royal Guard incident, as it came to be known in their families, had transformed 3 thoughtless tourists into 3 young men who understood that true maturity means taking responsibility for your actions and working to make the world a little better than you found it. Their London adventure had lasted only a week, but the lessons they learned would influence their decisions for the rest of their lives. Years later, when they told the story to their own children, they would emphasize not the foolishness of their actions but the grace of those who chose to see their potential rather than just their mistakes. It was, they realized, the most valuable souvenir they could have brought home from their travels.